Time, space, reality, the Campus Comics Cast. We will be your guide through these endless possibilities where a single choice can lead you to finishing the episode or shutting us off now. So, in an attempt to keep you on, joining me this evening are
Mike Atchison
and Shad Schubert.
And we are going to, of course, be talking about What If this episode, along with the first five issues of Shadecraft and the first 5 issues of Stray Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Campus Comics Cast is the official podcast for Muddy Monster Comics in Murfreesboro, Illinois, located at 1422 Walnut Street. And if you haven't been to the shop in its new location, be sure to head there and check it out. Lots of things going on with cryptids and universal monsters now at Muddy Monster Comics. So if that's something that interests you, then there's lots there to check out, including the Muddy Monster comic. So before we dive into What If, anybody want anything to say or add, or are we just ready to jump right in?
Oh, Mike's muted.
Oh.
I just told myself that I'm ready to jump right in.
Okay, all right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So now we already talked about the first episode of What If, but since we're going to talk about the entire season of What If, and obviously spoilers for everything that we're talking about on this episode, we might as well go ahead and at least mention the first episode again. So the first episode of What If is What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? And the byline for it is when Steve Rogers is seriously injured, Peggy Carter becomes the world's first super soldier. So, Aldo, do you want to recap your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. I felt like this was a pretty safe first episode. Not a lot of change. It seems like a lot of the overall outcome is pretty much the same. We don't get a giant difference. I think the only thing that you really get is that you also get an Iron Man in this time frame instead of a later Iron Man, because somehow Howard Stark comes up with the same idea that his son would come up with later. And so the ending was good. It was pretty solid. It felt like you just kind of did a gender or character swap with it, but like I said, pretty safe in my opinion.
All right, Mike, what about you?
Well, yeah, if you remember, we covered this first episode some time ago, and my thoughts were at the time, and they continue to be, that it's one of my favorite of the 9 episodes. And I like her as a character and as Captain America almost as much as I would Steve Rogers. It was a good story. The animation I thought was good. I'm not really great at comparing one animation style over another. Some of the people I've heard talk about this said that they didn't like this What If animation, but I'm good with it. I love the voice acting, that they're trying to get as many of the original, like Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter and Sebastian Stan as Bucky. I mean, and even the ones that aren't, as we go on into other episodes, they aren't the original actors. They definitely sound very close to them, enough where I had to take a second look. So yeah, I like this first episode quite a bit. I do like World War II era stories very much anyway, so this was much to my liking.
I'm the same way. I like this episode, but for me that was a disappointment because I wanted to love this episode. This whole concept. I mean, I'm a huge Peggy Carter fan from the MCU. I think Haley Atwell is great. She was great in the Agent Carter series, which I felt like should have got another season, beyond the 2 that we got. But I think the big reason why I was disappointed in this is because you mentioned it felt safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just so predictable. It's like most of the stuff was the exact same thing that happened, just switching around a couple of characters, so it felt very predictable. That being said, I did sit down and watch all the episodes straight through, and I actually enjoyed it a little bit more the second time. So that was good. But overall,
That's a
it
lot
was
of
good, but
watching.
not great. Yeah. Well, I had to, when you're shipping stuff out through eBay all the time, I save cardboard, right? So what I like to do
Mhm.
every once in a while is sit down in my living room with all my cutting materials and just binge watch something while I'm cutting cardboard. So I literally was cutting cardboard for all 9 episodes of What If.
Wow.
So that
All
tells you
right,
the
folks.
excitement of my life right there. So
You just got an inside view of the life
that's
of
right.
Scott Reed.
Yeah, that's me trying to be, a good steward, right? It's like instead of just throwing away all this cardboard,
That's right.
like, let's
That's right.
reuse and repurpose. So I take all this pieces of
Very
cardboard.
environmentally
Right.
conscious there, Scott.
That's what it is. So that's what I'm thinking of is the environment. So all right. So now episode 2, what if T'Challa became a Star Lord? The rough and tumble space pirates known as the Ravagers abduct T'Challa instead of Peter Quill. And of course, this episode is, important because this starts the final Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa episodes that we're going to get. So now part of the rumor was with this episode is that this was supposed to become an animated series that was going to be based on this character along with Chadwick Boseman at some point in the future. So I don't know if you had heard that or not. That being said, it was one of my on the lower rankings of my favorite episodes. But it does have Howard the Duck. So
there's a win there.
Going for it.
Yeah.
Got that going for it. So Mike, what'd you think?
Yeah, this was on the, I was going to say it was a big fat no, but to be kind, it was on the lower end of the spectrum of the episodes. This is like, chocolate and peanut butter, two great tastes that don't go great together in my mind. This seeing T'Challa and his normally very stoic, very majestic personality that is so much in contrast to Star-Lord, which, I didn't buy it as much. And it's not like it was bad. I mean, you had actually probably more of the voice actors of the original cast in this than any of them. But it wasn't really something I zipped through it and I'm not going to watch it again.
Yeah, I tried to rank these episodes, and that was tough. And the last time I ranked them, of the 9, for me, this came in at number 8. So, but I don't think any of them were terrible. Just obviously that there was some that were better than others.
Yeah.
So, all right, Shad, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. There was just something about, and it made you question the believability of, T'Challa is a charming character, but is he really that charming to be able to convert all of these kind of horrible kind of people to do a lot better? And is he really that good of a leader, even at such a young age? And with the influence of the Ravagers, can he really rise to that occasion? I mean, I get that we're talking about pretend, but overall, it just kind of felt like this whole story was a little bit of a the fit just didn't seem right on there. It does make sense that Yondu and the Ravagers would pick up the wrong kid. I mean, that they've got the fact that they actually did pick up Peter correctly in the original is kind of quite of a feat of its own.
Well, I guess that's like every single episode is supposed to have the one thing that changed. Like in episode 1, it's like, well, what if Peggy stayed in the room instead of leaving the room? So this one was, what if Yondu subcontracted out the pickup of the child, right?
Yes,
so that was the one thing that changed. So
yeah. And I did like the cliffhanger at the end, that Ego shows up to find Peter working at Dairy Queen. That was kind of a funny. That was the endings for these, I think, across the board kind of wrapped up oddly, and we find out later why they wrap up kind of funny with odd cliffhangers. But this one kind of had enough of an ending where you felt like it could just be the end. Like it was good enough. Same with the Peggy Carter one. Some of these had good enough bow endings with a funny little, what you could call a post-credit scene that didn't really require you to continue the story if you didn't want to. And I thought that's what we were getting into when we started this, was that we were gonna have just these nice little standalone stories in it, and so at this point I still
Yep.
feel like that. You kind of get that vibe still.
Exactly.
But it was not my favorite either.
Okay. All right. Good. It's like sometimes like I wonder if my taste is just different than the rest of the world's, right? All right. So the next episode, what if the world lost its mightiest heroes? So Nick Fury struggles to launch the Avengers when candidates are targeted by a serial killer. So for me, it's like, I did have a little hard time believing that Hank Pym could actually kill all of the Avengers. But overall, I guess it was kind of the middle of the road episode for me. I did really like the addition of the Yellow Jacket armor, that we had from the movie. So he comes in instead of being Ant-Man, he shows up as Yellow Jacket basically there towards the end. So Shad, what did you think about the third episode?
I liked the murder mystery part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I honestly did not guess that it was going to be Hank Pym. I've heard other people go, "You didn't see that coming, like you didn't get that," and I was like, "No, I was completely in the dark. I just kind of was along for the ride." But we're starting to get into this is the first of many of death as being an easy kind of out in the what if scenarios. It's like, what if we just kill a bunch of people? What if we kill some of your heroes and you have new ones instead? Or that just it seems like it's either going to be swapping jobs or it's going to be somebody's going to have to die. And so we kind of head down the death stories of it. I didn't get in this the whole back end of it. This was a kind of a bad ending to me. It was just like Loki stays on Earth, he decides he's gonna rule, and then we gotta figure out now we got Captain America and Captain Marvel we're putting together Avengers now after the Avengers have died, and I felt like that was a little shoehorned if it was going to be a standalone story, but obviously there were other plans on that. But there's not a lot of these that are my favorites, so this one's definitely middle of the road for me.
Yeah. Mike, what about you?
The premise, the title and the premise, they really had me hooked, but I had a hard time believing, like you said, that it could be Hank Pym that did all that, but it seemed a little bit contrived, and really Bruce Banner / the Hulk exploding, and that instantly, after reading Immortal Hulk for so many months now, I just can't even begin to believe that, even whatever Earth this is on. Still, it is the one episode I can't even remember how it went without reading about it. I need to go back and watch it again, and I think maybe I'll like it more, maybe. But yeah, it's at best middle of the road for me.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out the first two episodes had a real clear one thing changed, right? So this one doesn't really have that real clear one thing changes. So you have so Hope joins Shield, and Hope dies.
Yes.
So as opposed to there really was a kind of a whole chain of things here that had to happen for this particular story to
that's a good point,
to make it. So it was a little bit different. Now the whole idea of like the death and stuff, since What If is one of those series where basically every single issue is self-contained. So that's one of the advantages the writers always had with What If stories, is that they could, they wanted to kill somebody, they can kill somebody. If they want somebody, they can have more far-reaching effects because they know it's a one-off story and it doesn't actually affect the proper Marvel's universe. So, anything else on the third episode? Nope. All right. So, fourth one. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? A grief-stricken Doctor Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto in a dangerous effort to change the past. So, this is definitely one of the best episodes. And I actually have this down as my number one episode. So now I don't know if I'm renumbered these, if I would come up with the same order a second time or not. But so basically the premise here is that on the night of his accident, he takes, and now I've forgotten the doctor's name.
Christine Palmer.
Thank you. With him, and she is killed in the accident instead of him losing the ability to use his hands. So that's what sends him out on his search to ultimately become the Sorcerer Supreme. So, and of course, that takes a dark turn, as we see that most of these stories tend to do. But yeah, definitely one of the better episodes. And I guess one of the key things to this episode is we get that little extra thing towards the end where, the Watcher for these first 3 episodes has just kind of been there telling the story about what's going on. Now we have, for the first time, somebody who's in the story becoming aware of the presence of the Watcher. And it's just a real brief, one line during this episode. But it's kind of like somebody's able to start seeing behind the curtain, some things that are going on. So we get that for the first time in this episode. Mike, what's your take on this episode?
It was, I'd say, yeah, it was at the top half, easily smack dab in the top half, maybe 7, or I'm sorry, maybe 3. It was predictable though. You kind of knew. I mean, it was kind of poignant even for animated show, and this, seeing this version of Doctor Strange, he just would not admit that he couldn't bring her back no matter what he did. And when he did, she just would die. I don't know. I guess this is spoilers, right? I mean,
yeah, we said spoilers. So yeah,
she's gonna die another way, and I'm like, oh, good grief, that's terrible. And but you can see someone that's so, they feel like that their existence is so dependent on someone else's, and I thought that made him a little more relatable as a person, Stephen Strange, than what I've seen before. So that elevated it back up, even though it was a little torturous to see this over and over, this thing go over and over again. And it as it turns out, it plays very much into the ultimate, the final episode. So it's having seen that now, that really bumps it up to one of the higher ones for me. So yeah, good one.
I gotta be honest. I was really bummed out because I thought that he was actually going to lose his heart. Like we were talking like an Iron Man type scenario, like he was going to be Iron Strange or something. And I was like, this dude has not lost his heart at all. I'm like halfway through this episode.
Metaphorically loses his heart.
I know. But I was like, oh, he's going to change places and he's going to be it's going to be like an Iron Man, Doctor Strange kind of thing. But it wasn't. I agree with Mike. It was pretty predictable up until like the splitting into the Strange Supreme kind of alternate thing, and I thought that's not a bad character. I thought he was kind of cool, and I'd be curious to know, will we see that Strange Supreme in something more live action? It'd be interesting to see that version, since it is Benedict Cumberbatch playing that and everything. He's already into that role, like just to see that slightly altered version take a peek in the multiverse of madness or something would be pretty cool. But yeah, middle of the road episode. I still haven't been wowed yet for me. I was still by this time I'm like, okay, I'm still in. I'm no problems, but nothing awesome either.
Well, I'm still have liked every single episode, but this was the first one that really, really, I thought was impressive. So now we do have the return in that episode of a entity from the first episode, right? Because we basically had the Cthulhu monster that was there at the end, and then one of in this episode, Doctor Strange is summoning all these creatures to steal their energy. Right, and one of the creatures that he summons at some point is this same Cthulhu monster.
Oh yeah.
So he's kind of like this returning background character, who we'll see one more time. I think one more time. So, all right. So let's see, 5th episode. Yeah, 5th episode. What if zombies? So when the Avengers are infected by a zombie plague, the surviving heroes search for a cure. So I learned one thing from this episode, is that right now in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the correct thing to do for everybody's benefit in the future is to just go ahead and kill Hank Pym. because he is apparently the cause
Yeah.
of the majority of bad things that could possibly happen in the Marvel universe. So they just need to eliminate him right now. So and we don't have to worry about zombies. We don't have to worry about the Avengers dying. Nothing like that. So
That's a good point.
yeah. So that's about the only thing I really had to say about this episode. Is it's zombies and it's kind of a it's what you would expect from a Marvel zombie story. So Shad, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. It's the perfect, like, this is kind of what I expected out of a what if story, of just like, give me this contained little thing that has a bunch of action, a bunch of people running around with this bizarre kind of concept, and it's kind of one and done in the best kind of way, because there's not a lot of returning from it in that way. There's a lot of, it is the death scenario. It's a lot of like, now they're zombies, we got to kill them, kind of thing. I thought it was well paced, 30-minute episode where it just kind of goes. I kind of thought it would go well when I saw that was on the roster I was like, oh, that'll be a good one. I don't know how they're gonna pull off a Marvel Zombies, I guess, show now. Because is this gonna exist in that? Is it gonna spin off of that, or is it gonna stand alone on its own? Because that seems like a lot of zombie Marvel cartoon. I did enjoy the animation the most in this episode. I felt like it didn't bother me as much. I think because zombies are so cartoony already, that their choice of animation style just kind of was like, okay, well, they're zombies, they're gonna look funky anyways. So that was most of what I saw. I liked the animation, and I liked the action that was in it, how quick paced it was. But I am a little like, okay, we're gonna do a full series on zombies, but
I suspect that they will. This is a what if, so this will remain a what if, and then they'll do. You would almost think they want to start with the whole different origin, and maybe even something tied a little bit more closely to what happened in Ultimate Fantastic Four. So, but who knows? I guess we'll find out whenever they get around to it. So,
yeah.
Mike, what about you?
Well, I never read the original Marvel Zombies, so it's all the same to me, really. This was like to me, it was like a high calorie treat that had no nutritional value at all.
Yes.
It was fun to see. It was like playing in an episode of a video game where you just get to blast all the monsters you can, and they just keep respawning, and you had fun watching it or doing it or whatever, and didn't think too much about the story and just enjoyed it. It's probably still on the lower end of the tier for me, just because it didn't have much. Really, it was just there, and it was fun. So
yeah, I had this episode at number 6, so it was the bottom of my middle 3. So
okay,
but I guess kind of okay. So the story in this one, of course, is the Hulk comes back from when Thanos is about ready to invade the Earth. The Hulk gets sent back. He goes looking for Strange and finds that the Earth's been taken over by zombies. So a small group of survivors, they end up at a military base where the Vision has, because of the Mind Stone, the zombies don't basically come into the base. But he has, unfortunately, has been keeping Scarlet Witch alive there, though she's been infected. So I guess alive is maybe not the best term to use there. But so she's been, tricking heroes in and feeding them to Wanda. So such as Black Panther. So we got another appearance of Chadwick Boseman in this episode. And it's important to talk about the Scarlet Witch here, because she's obviously very powerful in this episode, and she'll make a return appearance later in the series. So, all right, on to episode. I've already lost count. Is this episode 6?
6. Yep.
6.
Yeah.
All right. So what if Killmonger rescued Tony Stark? Killmonger rescues Tony Stark when his Humvee is attacked in Afghanistan, and manipulates his influence for his designs of conquering Wakanda. I liked how this episode kind of tied into, several of the movies. Basically, it tied in well with the first Iron Man movie. It tied in well with the second Avengers movie. So I thought it was a nice tie-in with just that slightly different take, on the story. This was actually in my top 3 of all the episodes. So I can't remember. Mike, go.
Go.
You probably shouldn't go to me next because I don't know. I wish I could say I liked it better than I did, but I don't. It didn't really resonate with me. I don't know. The mixing, the Wakanda storyline with the Iron Man storyline and all that. I guess I just probably need to be a little bit more versed or immersed in Marvel lore to maybe appreciate some of that. I can see why you like it, Scott, but just without being able to articulate why, I can't say that was my favorite. Somewhere
Okay.
somewhere in the Midland range.
Okay, well, Shad, what about you?
I
Back
did
me up
like,
here.
yeah, from the very beginning, like as soon as, and it was one of the, if I remember right, one of the preview things even was you seeing Killmonger saving Tony Stark in like the promos for What If. But this was at that moment I was like, okay, I like this. I'm in on it. I like this crossover. I really liked Killmonger's his way that he worked up through the organization with Tony, and he earned Tony's trust, and really just kind of got to a point where I wish he wouldn't have killed Tony Stark off, at least not as soon as he did in the story, but I get that it's a 30-minute show and you got to kind of move the story along at a certain pace. But I liked the two of them together and how he was calling out Obadiah for his stuff, and kind of he was enough on the outside where he could call out those things. And the plot throughout, just gaining the mantle of Black Panther by just planning everything against everybody and killing Black Panther and killing oh gosh, what's his name, Ulysses Claw, and then just having it look like they knocked each other out, and just the really just bad guy of him, and the horrible strategist that he is to put it all together, I thought was a really cool thread on that. So that's like kind of what got me on. I was just like, he's a mastermind in this, and he really worked all of the possible angles. It's almost like he watched all the movies and then knew the angles afterwards.
And I like too how they were able to use. They kind of set up the potential for what's going to happen next with that whole Shuri and Pepper know what's going on,
Yeah.
and how are they going to handle that moving forward. So it really had enough to make you want a little bit more out of this particular universe.
Exactly.
So.
This was probably one that did the best in going like, oh, I would watch a part 2 of this story. Once again, still not realizing what they're going to do at the end of this. I'm all in the bag for going, cool, maybe next season they'll do a part 2 to this.
All right, so episode 7, What If Thor Were an Only Child? So Thor, who never learned to be a good hero, throws an out-of-control intergalactic party on Earth. The best thing I can say about this episode is that I am happy that the IMDb ratings agree with me that this is the worst of the entire series.
Agreed.
So, yeah. And I've said this before, and anybody, the two people who listen to this podcast are probably sick of hearing me complain about Chris Hemsworth. But, maybe this will get some of this whole he wants to be a comedic actor out of his system, and we can get Thor back to being at least a somewhat serious character in the MCU. Oh, and Howard Duck's back in the episode. Shad, what about you?
Yeah, I like Thor Ragnarok, and I think that I feel like that, but this crossed the line even further. So like that was probably the most amount of bro Thor, or whatever you want to call him, that anybody could take would be Ragnarok, and this went so far beyond that, and it didn't even make any sense. And even if he was an only child, it just didn't seem like this would play out for that character in that way.
No.
The frat boy Thor, it wasn't. But I agree, the worst episode in the run.
Good. Yeah, everybody in Asgard waiting for Odin to go to sleep so they can do what they want. It's like, really? Really? Oh. Mike, what about you?
I mean, yeah, I definitely predicted this was going to be your least favorite, and I couldn't agree more. I mean,
Okay, good.
come on, this is a god, or Thor's a god, or a demigod, or a demigod, or whatever he is. It's just, I know this is an alternate universe, but it's not one that I want to watch or go to anytime soon. It's just everything I don't like about, even if it's not a show, or I just don't like that kind of behavior. And come on, it's so juvenile, and they couldn't incorporate that into a story and make it fun or cute or whatever you want to call it. It just, there was nothing really appealing about it. This is the bottom of the barrel for me.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. I approve of your taste in there, Mike.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah, I know you're seeking my approval. All right, why don't we move on to the next episode, because this next one was really, really good. So I even had it as my number 2 episode. So what if Ultron 1? Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton seek to destroy killer robot Ultron following a cataclysmic event. Almost certainly the darkest of all the episodes. And it's kind of, to me, it's kind of ironic that the only 2 Avengers that are left are the 2 non-powered Avengers.
Right.
It's like all the rest of the Avengers are dead. And you just have Black Widow and Hawkeye just hanging around. And apparently they're the last 2 people on the planet even. So, yeah. I do like how they brought in Arnim Zola, from the first Avenger, and and Winter Soldier, brought him kind of into this story. So that was really, really a nice tie-in. And of course, he'll show up again in an upcoming episode, which I guess there's only one more after this one. So not too much of a spoiler in advance. Right. So Shad, what do you think about this episode?
I feel like there was a little bit of, and maybe it just was because episode 7 was so close, but so at the end of episode 7, the kind of cliffhanger is that Ultron shows up in vision with the whole like Ultron vision with all of the Infinity Stones, and then we start the next episode and he only has the Mind Stone. And I feel like there's not a lot of gain by episode 7, it ending with him having all of the Infinity Stones. And you could easily just spin these together as like, okay, here's episode 7, and then it runs right into episode 8. But I get that you got to have them in separate worlds so that we can go get them all later. Maybe if they weren't as close, it wouldn't have been as confusing, because I felt like, wait, I just saw Ultron and he had all of the Infinity Stones, and now he's only got one. Yeah. But I think that was just a missed opportunity, maybe to either connect it or maybe set these episodes in a different road.
And who knows, maybe they did not air them in the order that they originally intended to. It's kind of like that whole, Firefly thing where they, there was a certain order that those were supposed to be aired in initially, and they completely rearranged the first like 3 or 4 episodes. Yeah. And people were confused. And it's like, had a detrimental effect on that longevity of that series. So who knows? Maybe now, probably not, but could be. It could be. So,
but the highlight for sure was the interactions between Ultron and the Watcher, and just busting through the multiverses, and that kind of fight towards the end of that was definitely a highlight for me. That was really cool.
I was going to talk about that in the last episode, but since you brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and throw it in here. So now, one of the things that they have established in both the Marvel Cinematic Universe and in the comic books is that the Infinity Gems / Infinity Stones only have power in their native universe. So when you move the stones to another universe, they lose their powers. Yeah. So as soon as Ultron leaves his universe, those stones become worthless. That's just obviously not the case in What If.
Just like the paperweights in Loki.
Yeah, in absolutely. Loki, exactly. Yeah, so that's when they established that in the MCU, was in Loki, and then in Fantastic issues of Fantastic Four, Reed Richards, finds the other versions of himself, one or more of whom have the Infinity Gauntlet. And he's like, well, why can't I take your Infinity Gauntlet into my world and fix all their problems? And it's like, well, because that gauntlet doesn't have any powers in your world, because it's tied to this universe. So for me,
They
That was
broke
a
some
big.
rules.
That was, yeah, they broke some rules that they had established for both the comics and for the movies. So I'm probably letting that bother me just a little bit too much, but oh well. There you have it.
Mhm.
But that'll play into next episode. We'll talk about that, right?
Yeah, I guess so. So
So this episode should really be titled "What if the Infinity Stone rule was broken?"
there you go. What if the Infinity Stones worked in other universes? So.
Well, this was my favorite. I really, this felt like a Mark Waid written episode story. Ultron felt like a real threat. I don't remember feeling quite that much with the Age of Ultron movie. And that's saying something.
It's like creepy James Spader voice in the in Age of Ultron,
right. Yes.
I feel like Robert California was out to get.
It was, Shad, like you said, there was, it was so shocking to see the Watcher and the Watcher to have to get down to fisticuffs. I mean, that's so below his status.
Yeah.
It's like seeing, the Phantom Stranger or a Guardian of the Universe having to do some actual menial tasks such as fighting or trying to save his own skin. And it also led to a couple times. I mean, the Watcher, it's like the Watcher went from being the all wise, all speaking the voice of what's happening and just the narrator to what the hell's happening. When he said that, I was like, that's weird. Is that really what you were thinking? You just like, is this all an act? Which is the act here? That was the only downside, but overall, this is either 1 or 2 for me. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, Watchers that sit there going through his monologues that he goes through in every single episode in Ultron multiple times. Who says that? Is somebody there? Oh, I see you. And then all of a sudden, Watcher realizes, oh, I should have shut up 3 sentences ago, and none of this would have happened. All right, so last episode, what if the Watcher broke his oath? So that's kind of always been the joke in the universe with Watcher. He's only supposed to. Well, the first time the Watcher was he intervenes. So the Watcher gathers heroes from across the multiverse for one final battle against Infinity Ultron. So this would end up Chadwick Boseman's final performance, the Marvel's, we'll call it cinematic universe. I've already kind of mentioned my big complaint about the use of the Infinity in this one, but it kind of boils down to the Watcher brings this kind of completely odd band of, so you have like Killmonger, Black Panther, you got Party Thor, you've got our almost evil Doctor Strange, Captain Carter, Gamora, who we hadn't seen prior to this. And
so we didn't see Gamora before.
Maybe just in not as any major part of the episode. So I think she was kind of picked up.
Because it calls her in the note in the notes on Wikipedia. It says the Gamora variant who killed Thanos, and I was like, I don't remember watching this. I don't remember this happening. Okay.
Yeah. So no. Yeah. So she hadn't been in an episode prior to this, other than maybe in the background. So was there another? I feel like there was one more. Oh, Black Widow. Yeah, and Black Widow. So that was like, because there were 6, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Watcher brings these 6 together as the only combination of heroes that can defeat this Infinity Ultron as it's described. And what we really learn is that it really just has to be, it's a trick just basically to get Artem Zola uploaded, who's this analog intelligence as opposed to a digital intelligence, uploaded into Ultron and let them two fight it out for eternity. So it really didn't matter who the heroes and villains were. It was all something that the Watcher was able to foresee and, ended up with the ending that we get for this series. So Shad, what do you think about this episode?
This is where I start to feel like everything gets forced a little bit. for me. And my note said, if we have to do it this way, then I guess they did a good job. But I would have rathered it be a standalone kind of just everything like we said before. But with the big picture of it all, I did like them coming together. Obviously, could have done without Party Thor. But the overall plot device made sense to do what they had to do. I liked it. It felt very comic booky. It felt like the plot device that they had to upload the manual program in to fight. Like, it just felt like a really good comic book kind of mashup and everything. The only thing that I really didn't care for is that at the end, when Natasha doesn't want to go back, and so she's allowed to go to a different universe and where they didn't have a Natasha. And I feel like that just opens us up to letting the MCU not have any stakes at all. Potentially, it's like, okay, if Natasha doesn't want to go to this world and can go to one where she doesn't exist, then what makes her not be able to come into our prime MCU that we're currently in? Or for Steve Rogers to come back and because we don't have a Steve, it really opens up us to just not have any stakes. And that was the only part that I was like, oh, really? We're going to give her a choice at the end of this and she's going to be able to do that. And I get that for multiverse, opening up that. But I don't feel like I think the original concern overall was, is an audience going to be able to understand multiverses, and is that going to be too heavy of a concept? But I feel like it's going to be less of that as things get on and just make it messier. We're going to understand where everything comes from, but it's just going to be like, but we killed Natasha, so we can move on. We got more characters we can play with. Let's not play with these same toys over and over again. So that was the only kind of downside I had to it. But overall, like I said, if we had to do it, this was a good way to do it.
Well, I don't think we're going to have any issue of Scarlett Johansson doing another Disney movie anytime in the near future.
Fair.
So I don't think she'll be showing back up anytime soon. But I don't know. That was to me, I liked that scene just because, she's the one who you kind of felt like had sacrificed the most. And at least she got her reward, for her part in it. But you are 100% correct that a lot of people just aren't going to understand multiverses. I know, Mike, you love the whole multiverse concept, but what it boils down to is very quickly a multiverse becomes very messy. You already said, that. And it gets very, muddy.
Yes.
And keeping track of where things are and from a storytelling point, what's happened. I'm very concerned about this move to a multiverse in the cinematic with Spider-Man Far From Home and the Multiverse of Madness. I hope that Multiverse of Madness kind of wraps up the whole multiverse concept, and it's not something we're dealing with moving forward in the Marvel Cinematic. But Mike, tell me I'm wrong.
You're not. I think the multiverse concept, instead of it being such a slow rollout like it was in the 1960s with DC, it was very slow to. I mean, you had Earth 2, and those heroes and those characters were so distinctive. They weren't just carbon copies, and it didn't cause much confusion. Now, what Shad was saying about the messiness of it. It sounds like what you might hear some writers complaining about in the late 70s or early 80s, which led to the conception of Crisis on Infinite Earths to bring all of those multiple Earths, which there were only a handful that really that were significant at all, roll them into one. That really didn't solve any problems. It threw all the continuity cops in fandom went nuts over it. Roy Thomas, not the least. Because they pretty much destroyed all of his Earth 2 plans. And then they took him 20 years to realize, that's actually pretty cool. And what do? They kind of do what Marvel's doing. They all of a sudden, they, like with 52 and then with Multiversity, all of a sudden they're just jamming down our throats, all of these different Earths, and you can't keep track of them.
Oh.
Definitely not even the most avid multiverse fan can't keep track of which Earth has what the the story is, or what what makes it unique.
Yeah,
I mean,
with New 52, it's like they kind of established, oh, there are 52 different Earths. Okay, great.
yeah,
But they try to like tell us all 52 Earths like within the first year. Like these are the 52 Earths. And now writers don't have any flexibility to do something a little bit different.
yeah. And to roll it out slowly and it'd be, oh, cool, that's Earth 13 and everything's magical or something,
Right.
It's all like you just so jammed.
Everybody's unlucky on Earth 13.
Yeah, right. It's an unlucky universe. And then they go even farther with it and have the dark multiverse, which is sort of like a whole nother multiverse. So it's an omniverse, really.
A multiverse of multiverses.
And I just want to smack Scott Snyder for even bringing that up. Sorry, Scott. But
throwing it down right here. You heard him, Scott Snyder.
I guess we won't get him on our show.
Your email address for him to send his rebuttal is?
No, I mean that very facetiously. My poor old mind is not as fresh and as flexible as some of the younger folks. It's just I know what I know, and that's probably the way it's going to stay. But it's all in all, though, I think this last episode, like you said, one of you, Scott or Shad, that if it was going to end this way, that it's still a pretty good way to end. I mean, the Guardians of the Multiverse. Okay, that sounds pretty comic booky, and I liked it. They could have made Thor like sober up just a minute to realize, okay, here's the gravity of the situation, and then we'd be like, yeah, that's the Thor I'm looking for. But no, they couldn't back off that. But overall, I'm glad these last two episodes were so high in my rankings to make it. I feel really good about the entire series.
Yeah, I was glad to have another opportunity for them to use Captain Carter. I also, up until Endgame, and maybe even after Endgame, I really haven't thought about this, but my absolute favorite scene in all of the Marvel movies was basically about the first 20 minutes of Winter Soldier, where they drop Cap on this ship and he runs around the entire edge of this ship just annihilating guys. And they kind of recreated that scene here with Captain Carter, her diving in without a parachute, her wiping guys out, the fight with Batroc. That was just kind of a nice little, homage back to Winter Soldier. So that maybe, pumped up my enjoyment of this episode just a little bit. I guess that maybe balanced out at least Party Thor a little bit. So, I don't know. We usually try to give some type of a rating to a series. Do we want to try to do that here?
We can try.
Okay, who wants to try first? I haven't rated it yet, so
nobody's gonna say no now. I mean,
okay, all right,
we're in.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go with very fine, because I've watched it twice. I enjoyed watching it. I wouldn't be opposed to watching it again. So I think that puts it in that very fine category for me. It's kind of like my criteria for something that's very fine. So especially a handful of these episodes, I would probably, moving forward, I'll probably skip Party Thor every single time.
Yeah, now that you've seen it all, you can kind of pick and choose a little bit, especially since they're all not necessary to watch in a certain order or anything like that. Yeah,
so I'm gonna go very fine.
I'll throw it out a 7.0, a fine, very fine. And it has some rewatchability, but there's a lot of imperfections in there.
I found watching it straight through actually helped my enjoyment of it a little bit.
Okay, that makes sense, because the not so great things are going to be over, and you'll bump into something that's good next, and you don't have a week to think about how much you didn't like that thing.
Mike, what about you?
I think I'm with you on the very fine. The better ones, even though you're giving 9 episodes each their own rank, the ones that were good were so much better than the ones that were bad. I think it was weighted more towards that side, so that's why I think it's easy to say an 8 points. There are very, very fine. Maybe even a very fine plus, but I need to get away from pluses and minuses because I can't keep track of all that.
All right. Do you want to say anybody want to say their favorite episode? We've already talked about our least favorite.
Sure.
So yeah. So I mentioned mine was the Doctor Strange episode. I think I'm gonna stick with that for now. So
I think I'm gonna go with, and especially with what Mike said, I'm gonna the What If Zombies, because it was just all a bunch of empty calories. It didn't mean anything. It was just a good sugar rush of enjoyment there. Yeah, and that's what I showed up for, and that's what I got with that one, was just showing up for some empty calories, and I dug that.
Mike, what about you?
Oh, well, I kind of spoiled it earlier by saying it, but episode 8, What If Ultron won? To me, that was the ultimate superhero story where things are going to crap and everybody has to try to piece it together. And I can't think of
Everybody meaning two people.
well, yeah, right. And I was gonna say I can't think of two better characters. By the way, on episode 9, I forgot to mention this earlier, but since when did Natasha have the same archery skills as Cliff? Or Clint, I mean.
Clint,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, she shoots him right in the eyeball, and I'm like, I thought maybe Peggy Carter was gonna grab it, in mid-flight and then jam it in. But, anyway, yeah, episode 8 is my favorite.
Yeah, I had that as my number 2, so it's right there for me as well. So.
What's the potential? What do you think season 2 will look like? They've announced that there's going to be a season 2. It's coming sooner than later, I think. Maybe even sooner than Zombies or anything like that, as far as animated projects go.
Yeah,
Marvel versus DC.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
That won't happen. They're gonna have to squeeze in some of the future movie properties into this, or at least some of the properties that they haven't used yet. So we're probably going to see some Shang-Chi stories. I would expect to see some Eternals. We'll probably see something with the new Black Widow.
More Captain Marvel.
More Captain Marvel, yeah. Maybe some Photon / Captain Marvel. I bet we get a What If Monica Rambeau were Captain Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
What if story that would make a lot of sense. I bet we get some
She-Hulk. I want to see She-Hulk.
I was gonna say I bet we get some more Jimmy Woo is who.
Oh
yeah. I think he would be good for this because we didn't get any Paul. Well, yeah, we got a little bit of Paul Rudd Ant-Man. I guess I shouldn't say we didn't get any Paul Rudd Ant-Man. We got his head.
Yeah, right.
But that was the only time he was in it, right?
Well, maybe a what if Loki takes over the Timekeepers? What if at the end of that, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's kind of some, and then maybe do we get some Blade? Do we get some stuff that's not out yet? Just to introduce
Fantastic Four.
Before we get into the movies. So that's where some of the things I would expect to see in the next season. But going into the season, I would have said, we'll get a whole season of self-contained what if stories, and in season 2 is when we'll get the Watcher intervening.
Yeah,
which obviously, didn't happen.
I wonder if we'll build up again. There'll be another scenario towards the end where the Guardians of the Multiverse have to show up again, or will how is that gonna? We've established the superhero team that is this. So are they in there from the beginning of season 2?
And maybe we'll get our part 2 of the Killmonger Wakanda story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Shadecraft. Shall we move on to Shadecraft?
All right.
So, I guess we just want to kind of go a high level on this. Do we want to drop it in issue by issue? What's our thought process on this one?
My notes aren't all that detailed to go issue by issue.
Okay. The high level.
High level. All right. Good deal. So. Chad, I think you said you had like the synopsis for like the first issue. You want to just go over that?
Yeah. So this is according to Comixology. It says Zadie Lou, who is our main character, is afraid of her own shadow. She's a teenager, so she really should have grown out of it by now, right? But something weird is happening in her small town. Zadie could swear the shadows are coming to life, watching her, trying to kill her. But how do you fight something you can't even touch? And how does all of this tie into her family of all things?
So creative team on this is Joe Henderson is the writer, and Lee Garbetz, I guess, is the artist, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, we have this high school student. So Zadie's a high school student. Doesn't have a whole lot of friends. She's having a rough high school because apparently, like about a year prior to the first issue, her brother has been in a coma. Was it? I've read this twice and I forgot why he was in a coma. Was it a car accident?
Car accident, yeah.
Okay, all right. So I didn't completely forget
No.
what was going on. So, with some of the things going on, suddenly here her powers start to manifest themselves. So it's kind of like we have this situation where she's dealing with learning about her powers, what's going to come with those powers, and of course, her parents have been keeping a secret from her. So I don't know. I only have a handful of notes on this. Shad,
well, kind of what my thought on it overall. There's nothing wrong overly about this story, but I like the idea of being able to control shadows. That concept we've seen before, with the Crown of Shadows and Lock and Key. It also has kind of a Books of Magic kind of vibe where there's a teacher that is a well-seasoned in whatever this mystical power is, kind of going in, and there's a family history that you don't know about, which kind of, all of these beats we've kind of seen in other stories, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad in that way, but it just felt like if you're gonna do something that we've kind of seen before, I want to see a unique take on it. But this was kind of just an easy take on it, or a middle of the road kind of bland take on it. I want to see if we're gonna do the same story or a similar story, give me some weird artwork, or give me like they're not humans, they're actually like some kind of alien, and this is an alien story or whatever. But the first issue I felt was really strong. It was a good setup with the kind of the love interest with her friend in high school, the shadows kind of creeping up, and her kind of the setup in high school of being kind of picked on or being isolated, and then being attacked in the woods, and the shadow of her brother kind of coming to life, and her kind of the setup was nice. I thought that first issue was pretty strong, but it just never quite evolved past that for me. And then just kind of the story just kind of got pretty like, okay, I kind of know where I'm going, and I don't feel like I'm reading just a run of the mill book that's not giving me anything fun after that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one of my notes, is that the characters are pretty standard fare. You got the teenager with the high school problems, got the boyfriend you don't know if they're going to be together, you got the parents that are keeping the secret from their kids, you got the person who's watching over the main character secretly and reveals to her that she can help her and train her and knows about her past. Then you're right. The first issue was good, and it just did not improve from there. It just kind of flattened or declined really for me from that first issue. Mike, what do you think?
It was serviceable. It was maybe a little bit too much teen drama for my liking. The whole shade or shadow thing that has been done several times. So if you're going to make this sort of unique, it can't be necessarily so much about the powers or whatever. It's going to have to be more about the character development and the rest of the story. I mean, I liked sort of some of the the twists. They were pretty quick turning twists. You didn't get a chance to get too immersed or too buying too much on this high school counselor being there for her benefit and end up turning out to be the special agent that isn't even really a good special agent. She's not looking out for her interest at all.
Yeah.
And the parents, or the parent that's also a shade crafter. It's just there, but reading it twice, it took me to read it a second time to move the needle a little bit more. There were some funny parts, where what was it, the second or third issue where the bullies, the girl was all the flowers in the locker, and then they're filming her reaction, and she's like, wait, what are you doing? So her brother in Shadow Farm makes the shadow of the bully, her rear end, her posterior, to be like a horse's butt. So
Yeah.
I was like pretty much laugh out loud. I did like that. But and there was also something else. I don't know if anybody ever seen this, but it threw me off so much I had to go back and look. But they announced for, I guess it was the principal's office, said, Zadie Chu, you need to report to the principal's office. And I'm like, is that the name? And so that was just, that was just a sort of joke that they didn't get her name right.
She's so unnoticeable that they don't even know her actual name.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there were some good parts. But it's still pretty, it's just, I'm not going to just be terribly disappointed. I didn't waste my time reading it, but I don't know that I'd go for a second volume or not. We'll see. And by the way, did you know this is getting picked up by Netflix?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things. One of my comments is like, overall, when we get to grading this, I don't have a very high grade on these first 5 issues. I hope that the TV series, whenever it comes out, does much better. Because I picked up 4 copies of this book when it came out. I got all 4 of them graded. I'm sitting there with 4 9/8s, just waiting for this book to skyrocket in value. And it just hasn't happened yet. So, based on my opinion of the story, I don't think it's gone to. So I feel like I'll not be making any money on those books. But maybe if it finds its way and gets a little bit closer, there'll be a little spec on it, and maybe I'll get lucky. But I just
it's by the creators of Lucifer, which I didn't.
Well, the showrunner for
the showrunner.
Yeah. I mean, because that character comes from Sandman, so that version is a Neil Gaiman character.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because that was what, episode 4 of Sandman or something like that, where Lucifer, this version of Lucifer shows up in the DC universe. So one thing that bothered me early on is in the first issue, I think what was different is like you don't have any idea of why the shadows are out to get her.
Mm-hmm.
In fact they're attacking her, as opposed to, so they are things that are coming from outside of her that are trying to impact her. And then as the story moves forward, it's almost like the shadows are now emanating out of her, as opposed to there being outside forces that are affecting her. So I really felt like their use of the shadows in this was kind of inconsistent. They kind of explained it away. It's like, well, the shadows attacked you when you were mad at yourself, so that's why they were outside coming in. I just didn't buy that. I just it just didn't seem right to me. And I guess you talked about them not doing anything different with this whole shadow thing. I guess the one thing that they did differently was that her brother actually is one of the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it didn't. One, it doesn't last, and and 2, it just didn't really add anything to the story for me. So, I also had some issues with the inconsistency of the power level of these shadows. We kind of have like in the second issue, or maybe actually it's in the first issue, where her and her brother get sucked into the shadows and she beats them with her cell phone flashlight.
Yeah.
And then later you've got the counselor who's the secrets agent, right? She's in a room with all these ultra powerful high intensity lights to basically beat down all the shadows, and the mother then takes her out by using the shadow in her mouth. It's like, really? There's not a whole lot of consistency there, the power levels. So I thought it was a pretty solid first issue, but went downhill pretty quick after the first issue.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it gets picked up off of these 5 issues, and it sounds like there is a second volume that's on its way. The issue 6 doesn't exist yet, but is, I guess, coming next year. All while they're also building a show, I guess, around only the first 5 issues, and that's interesting.
Well, to me, I'm hopeful that they have an opportunity to right the ship with the TV show. To me, like the best example of this is the book series for The Expanse. The book series for The Expanse, in my opinion, is pretty mediocre. It's serviceable science fiction, but the Expanse TV show is one of the best science fiction series that I've ever seen. So it's almost like on version 2 of the story, they were able to get rid of the things that weren't important, focus on, add in some things that they needed to for the future parts of the story to make sense, and they created a more coherent story. So what I'm hopeful for is that when they move this to television, it's like, okay, we've got our groundwork laid. What didn't work? What can we change to make this work better? So that's what I'm holding out hope for this series, is a much better television show than there is a comic.
Makes sense.
You know, the scene where she used the cell phone flashlight reminded me of a scene in Abbott. Didn't she have something similar like that happen?
Oh, yeah, but was it headlights? Because it was Abbott's in the 70s, so it would have had to have been like headlights on a car or something that were able to. Yeah,
maybe it was headlights. Yeah, because it was a genre bending tale as well. I mean, it was like detective or noir mixed with a little bit of horror.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wouldn't call this horror at all. This is like Archie horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything else to say about this story. Do either of you have anything else to add?
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and grade it. I gave it a very good, which is not as good of a rating as what it sounds like, because that's a 4.0. This is not something that I ever intend to read again. It's not something that I would feel like recommending to people as something that they absolutely should get. I don't have any interest right now in reading the next 5 issues if and when they ever make it to the shelves. So I did like the artwork. I thought the artwork was really, really good. The characters were easily identifiable and it looked good, and even the play on the shadows and the artwork was good, but the writing is just, I feel like it's something that I could have written, so if you can't do better than what I feel like I could have done, then it's not it's not that great. So
yeah.
All right. Who's next? Somebody bring it up from what I did.
I'll go up next. I'll go. I give it a fine. I liked it enough where I'd probably go up a full grade from yours. But I don't think I would reread it again. I probably won't read the sequel. But we are going to be hopeful that the TV show is successful for those graded copies.
That's right. Shad, what about you?
Well, I was like, man, I'm being harsh on this grade, and then I'm hearing your guys, and I was like, oh, I was really a lot more favorable because I gave it a very fine plus.
Wow.
I know, because I was like, I don't want to be like super harsh on it, but I don't feel like I'll read this again. And if Comixology throws a sale on issue 6 and it's like 99 cents, I'll be like, did it get better? I might pick it up then. But I'm not buying it on the rack when issue 6 comes out, and I'm definitely not rereading this or recommending it. So 6.5 is what I wrote, but I don't know if that stands. I feel like it's closer to a 5.
Okay, so fine plus, not very fine plus.
Oh yeah.
Okay, all right, because you said very fine plus.
No, sorry, hey, no, yeah.
What the heck are you talking about?
No, yeah, I noted wrong. Yeah, fine plus.
Fine plus. Okay, all right.
But probably more very good fine. I'm probably right on that line. I was using the scales of it above average is where I probably should have realized it's not really above average. It's an average collectible. This one is.
Yeah, I think the only. I don't know if this were on Comixology Unlimited and I could read it for free, I would have to have nothing else to read, I think, before I would go to issue 6 over something else. So unless somebody just tells me, oh, it got so good, then maybe. But it's gonna take some outside, influence for me to read any future on this. All right. Okay, so you ready to move on to Stray Dogs?
I think so.
All right. So my big thing, and we talked about this on the last previews episode, or actually the previous episode before. My big thing with Stray Dogs is that I didn't pick up any copies of issue number 1. And now I'm obviously regretting that because this book has taken off a little bit. And the reason why I didn't pick up any copies was it's still Dan Brown's fault, because I expected him, being the dog lover that he is, to have selected this book as his money pick. So I didn't select it as my money pick, expecting him to do it. And then he didn't come through. So it's his fault. So I'm sticking with that story. But does anybody want to do the synopsis of this one? I actually didn't even write any notes about a synopsis for this one. I can pull up the Comixology.
I've got the
Okay.
the little short. It's really short actually. The synopsis for, I guess, issue 1, which is also the volume 1 synopsis, is Sophie can't remember what happened. She doesn't know how she ended up in this house. She doesn't recognize any of the other dogs. I guess Sophie's a dog. You have to know that going into this. She knows something terrible happened, but she just can't recall. Wait, where's her lady? And that's where we kind of kick off the synopsis for the first issue.
Let's see. So the writer is Tony Flex, or is it Fleeks? I guess it's double E. It has to be Fleeks. Artist Trish Forstner. So for this, and it's definitely better than Shadecraft.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I think it was initially billed as like Silence of the Lambs meets
Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah. Oh, you read that in there, didn't you too?
Yeah. I saw it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's pretty accurate. So your basic concept is that you have this serial killer, and whenever the serial killer apparently meets his victims in dog parks, and his souvenir for all of his victims is he takes their dog. So he has this house full of dogs. And now I don't know if this is true, but this is a very key part of this story. Is like the opening scene. You have Sophie and her lady at the vet, and Sophie's getting a shot for some whatever it is, and the lady is like concerned that Sophie's going to be mad at her because there's this pain, and the vet is like, no, that's not how dogs' brains work. They remember certain things, but they don't have any short-term memory.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm not a dog owner. I don't know if there's any truth to that. But that is kind of a storytelling, something he uses to tell the story moving forward.
Yes.
And sometimes sometimes it feels like it drags the story out a little bit. Sometimes it's what like his, what he's able to use to, when he doesn't have some other way to get the story back on track, I'll throw in some memory with some event, and then we can kind of move things forward. So it's actually kind of an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
So again, me not being a dog owner, I really can't say one way or the other. I do know that my brother had a rescue dog, and that rescue dog apparently had come out of an abusive situation, so the dog did not take to new people very well. So that kind of, I guess there maybe is some truth to that about the memory of a dog, but that seems pretty long term. It's like any new face automatically puts this dog into a defense mode, as opposed to, and not like a violent defense mode, but a cowering, fearful type of defense mode. So that's my only real experience having anything to say with what they're describing here is a dog's ability to remember. So I don't know, Mike, what do you want to add in on this story?
I mean, I thought this was a delight. We're not a dog owner, but we are grandparents, you might say, to a dog that we have about half of the time, because my middle daughter travels and is working a lot and can't give. She wants Louis, that he's a golden doodle, and wants him to have somebody to keep him company, and we
Mm-hmm.
do that quite a bit, and we're just as attached as she is to him. And
I believe I met Louis. We said Louis, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
met
yeah,
Louis.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, he's a good docile
Mm-hmm.
dog, but
Yep.
there's so many personality traits. That's part of what I loved about this. I mean, the anime or the Don Bluth style art
Mm-hmm.
and the emotive expressions on these dogs is so spot on. And yet there's this sadness about the idea that they can kind of have a feeling, like you said, your brother's rescue, the dog that he rescued has,
Mm-hmm.
he's got this feeling and this fear of strangers, but in his mind he can't articulate or really put his finger on why he's afraid. And that shows up as you read these stories, or these issues. And I mean, and the personalities, I mean, you had Rusty, who was sort of like he took to Sophie pretty quick, and even if he couldn't remember something, he made her believe that he did, so she would feel better about her memories. And I'm probably cutting ahead a little bit, but as the listeners might be figuring out, and if you read this, you'll see that, you'll understand it. But these dogs, in sort of sequential order, these dogs are right now in the possession of the killer of all of these dogs' owners. That he kept them as trophies, and they don't even really realize it until Sophie comes in, and she's somehow, I forget how she gets he uses the scarf that used to be her lady, as she called her. He wraps it around her, and all of a sudden, boom, it hits her.
Yeah. Well, that's the trigger for her memory. Is she doesn't have any memory of her lady. She just knows that, and that's what's saying. This is the guy that brings us food. This is the house that we live in.
Yeah.
No, we get to go outside and play. When the truck comes down the driveway, we know that food's on its way. That's all the dogs think about. And until Sophie gets introduced into the mix, there's really not a whole lot of issues amongst the dogs. They're just kind of happy in their situation. So that when Rusty randomly brings this scarf that used to belong to Sophie's lady, and she smells it, that is then what triggers the memory, and that's where things start to go downhill for the dogs.
Right.
Or maybe not downhill, but they start to realize that maybe there's something else going on.
And it was just quite the mixture of, this is what I would call really horror mixed in with, I don't know, just Disney type animation. I mean, did a much better job of that than Shadecraft, and because serial killers are real. Shadows that come to life aren't. So I think that brought a sense of realism to it, and I don't want to keep, I could, if I went through each issue, I'd probably do it out of order and not do it very well, do it justice. And I want to let Shad talk about it a bit, because I think this was his suggestion anyway. So I just want to say that the personalities of these like 10 or 11 dogs you didn't get to really explore all of their personalities, but the key ones were just a joy to see how they, how it all kind of came together. And it was a positive, it was a good ending, such as it is. For only one person, it wasn't a good ending, but anyway, Shad, I'll turn it over to you. Hand the baton to you.
Yeah. This was one, I'm so glad we did pick this, because I don't know if I would have gotten to finishing the story on my own anytime soon, just because the stack's always so large. That's why I like doing this with you guys, because it's like, oh, that's a story I wanted to read, and I'll actually do it because I have to.
So I don't want to be that guy who doesn't do what we're supposed to do for an episode.
That's right. I don't want to.
That's me sometimes.
But yeah, it feels like this creative team who has, for the most part, from what I can tell, done My Little Pony only before this. There's not much else that either of these two have done prior to that, because I was like, I want more of what either one of these together or apart could bring. I'm just not really a My Little Pony person, so I couldn't that was where I drew the line. I was like, I don't think I'll go to that. But I'm excited for Dog Days for sure after this. It feels like they had a clear direction of what they wanted. They wanted to tell a murder mystery from a dog's perspective in a Disney-esque kind of style and really bring the focus on these dogs, and they exceeded super well with that execution. It felt like, here's our plan, here's how we're gonna do it, and they just stole it. They did awesome. It was very, very clear direction. I wasn't confused at any moment what they were trying to achieve with this story. It was like, okay, cool. The artwork was like I said, very, very Disney-esque, and hit like a lot of nostalgic points for me being like a Disney kid growing up. So I was in just on that alone, and then with a well-written story past that, and just having an adult story told with that kind of lens felt like a little wrong. Like, should we really be talking about like serial killers and everything looking this happy and this pretty? But I mean, when you start throwing in skinned animals and stuff, then you kind of then you kind of realize you're in a little bit different world. But yeah, it could have been a little bit more complex. It was I agree that the turns they took with the personalities of the dogs themselves and forgetting parts and then having to go, oh, remember, this is what we're trying to figure out, kind of helped with that story, because otherwise it could have been a little bit more, maybe less than 5 issues. But I wouldn't have minded seeing a little bit more complexity to the story, maybe a little bit more twist of an outside world or an outside person or a murder that was happening in real time during all of this that they tried to stop, or something. They could have pulled in a little bit more, but overall I thought it was awesome. I was super happy, like I said, to have read this for the show.
Yeah, I mean, they could have, followed along with the serial killer on one, like the next victim, while all this is going on back at the house, to maybe do something a little bit more, a little bit different with the story. But they did kind of have like that little bit of build up with, the first issue they talk about the punishment box, and then the second issue, Rusty gets sent to the punishment box, and when Rusty comes out, that's that memory thing. He doesn't remember what's inside the punishment box.
Yeah.
But they just remember that's the punishment box, and we don't want to go there. And then I just call him the firehouse dog. I can't remember.
Victor, the Dalmatian.
Yeah. So the Dalmatian is the first dog to really get in trouble. And he doesn't go into the punishment box. He goes behind the punishment box, and then you hear this gunshot, and, we all know what has happened, but the dogs don't really understand what has happened. And then they sneak into the punishment box, and then that's where you see the skinned Victor, So, yeah, so it gets a little creepy. If you are freaked out by violence against animals, this is definitely not a story for you. Because you have skinned dogs getting shot, dogs getting hit by vehicles. Most of that happens in the last 2 episodes or 2 issues. So it is something to keep in mind if you're faint of heart.
It's not super graphic. It doesn't show. I mean, it shows the skin, the pelt.
Yeah, it's not gore though.
Yeah, but I mean, did you not want to root for those dogs whenever Victor? He was rescued out of a fire by the emergency folks,
the EMT, that became his life.
Yeah, kept him, and then she was killed, but he knew what he had to do. Emergency. I mean,
yeah.
And they called 911, and they're all bark, 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 trying to talk human.
Yeah.
And oh man, that I loved Victor. That just that got me right there. I also liked Earl because he came around and he,
At the end, and what was it? Is it Imogene? Is that right? The big one?
Oh yeah,
Imogene.
So, but yeah. So now I don't. As we talk about this, I feel like I like it more than what my grade reflects on this book. I'm gonna go first because I suspect that I'm definitely gonna have the lowest grade out of the 3 of us on this one. But I'm actually going to up my grade from what I actually have written down. So I'm going to go with a fine, 6.0 fine. It is something that I think I would recommend to the right person. I don't think it's for everybody. And it's not quite in my wheelhouse for the type of stories that I want to read. I am at least interested enough that I'll look into the next series. Unlike Shadecraft, I'm don't have any interest in moving forward with this. But if this also were the end of it, if we just had these 5 issues and that was it, that wouldn't be, a big disappointment for me either. So I'm gonna go with a 6.0.
That's fair. Go ahead, Shad.
I'm way on the other end. I'm a 9.6 near mint plus.
Wow.
I can't tell you anything that I dislike about this. This story is that for me, I love a horror book. I love Disney cartoons. I still to this day. So I like an animal story. I like stories where not the people are in charge of whatever is going on, whether it's an alien or an animal. I don't care as long as it's not a human, because I've seen a lot of human stories. So this scratches a lot of itches for me, and was, like I said, executed very well. It seemed like it went just like it was supposed to for this. So definitely 9.6 for me.
Good
so
call.
I assume you own all these in singles?
I own the first 2.
Okay.
In singles. They're reprints. I'm in trying to collect them based on the movie posters that they came out with. I'm not really worried about what print it was, because each print has a different movie poster. So I've tagged which movie posters I'm trying to grab, and that's really where my collector side of this book has come.
Because for me, if there's a book that I like that well, that is a book that I have to own. A lot of people go digital with a lot of stuff, but
Absolutely.
if there's ever a comic book that I like that much, that has to go in my collection. I have to be able to, anytime I want, physically put my hands on that book and to be able to show it to people. It's like, you should read this.
This is awesome. Yes.
Yeah. So
So
I was just curious if you actually, had picked all those up yet or not.
Yeah. The fact that they're doing the knockoffs of the different movie posters is awesome. And so that made me go, well, if they're gonna do that, then I'm gonna get the movies that I like, and I'm really I'm not gonna just get them, because I was late to this ball game. I had Stray Dogs. Why do I want to read read that book? I didn't have a lot of interest just by the title. Maybe they didn't sell it well to me. But afterwards I was like, I think when the trade was solicited, I was like, I want to check this book out. And then as I got to know more about it, I was like, oh no, I want these movie poster ones, because that'll be the ultimate collection of just like, because in any time there's a variant of when they do movie poster spoofs or anything like that, that's something I'm always
Did you get
into.
any of the deceased ones as well?
No, I don't know about those.
Oh yeah, I mean they have like It, and I can't even remember all the various
I'll have
ones.
to check that
but
out.
The deceased series, there's a bunch of horror movie poster variants for that. So yeah,
I'm noting it at the moment.
Mike, what about you?
I'm a straight up 9.4. And now hearing you talk about, wow, if I graded it that high, I'd have to have a physical copy, and I don't. And now I'm thinking, how am I going to do that? Because I liked it enough. I'm a dog lover. I don't know. It's different in a way that I'm glad to have. I wish I would have been more adventurous and picked it up, because I did look at it pretty hard in previews and I just didn't do it. And now I'll have to find them in back issue bins or somewhere.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, somewhere. Maybe I can get online and get them. Who knows?
Well, I mean, you could get like later prints for them, I guess, but yeah, you're not going to get any first prints of those. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, obviously you could get them, but they're going to cost.
I wouldn't get them. I wouldn't get them for resale value or anything.
Yeah.
I'd get them maybe just a trade even. It's something other than digital, which is the only thing I've read it. That's the only way I've seen it was digital. Or maybe I'll just stick with the memory of it, which was a good memory. So
You and Jim Steranko. Just remember that moment. Just how it made you feel.
That's right. Hey, now, didn't they just solicit the sequel to this though?
Yes, it's a 2-issue series. We talked about it the last 2 issues of preview. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an anthology type thing. I wonder how they're gonna handle it. I wonder if we'll revisit each of the dogs from this story and kind of get a little bit of their backstory or their current story, or what we'll see. Who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can find while you guys are talking, I can look online and see if I can find a description of it, because it's Dog Days, right?
While you're looking for that, I was just going to say that if I didn't change my buying habits, I'd continue down that path of just buying everything that looks good, and then I have no room for anything else. So I'm trying to be a little bit more discerning, and then it causes me to go, man, I wish I would have got the physical copy of that. But still, it's worth probably getting, maybe at least in trade. I can find it somewhere.
Oh yeah.
A series of vicious short stories howling straight out of the pages of Stray Dogs, 2021 surprise cartoon horror smash hit. In Dog Days, each stray will get their moment to shine. Questions will be answered, mysteries will be solved, and old wounds will be torn open. Starting this December, every dog has its day. So
I'm gonna have to go to a shop to pick that up because I didn't order it for Mike. So.
Yeah, I ordered multiple copies because I just told myself I'm not gonna make the same mistake twice.
Okay, then sell me one.
Well, I might just do that. So I'll just charge you double what I paid for it. So
okay.
Yeah, they showed this one with the Creepshow movie variant.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's the one I got.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
I already when I ordered, I went ahead and just ordered the movie cover variants for these two because I was like, not even gonna worry about it. Just gonna take care of it right now.
Take my money. My money. Yeah, well, it's like when we come up with these ratings, it's like I had to come up with some type of criteria for me to, not just make everything up there kind of high, So anything that I grade a 9.0, that's something I feel like I need to own.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Some type of physical copy. 8.0 is something that I would, and really enjoyed reading, would read it again, don't feel the need to own it. 6.0, that's when we get down to that it was a good read, but I don't, I might recommend it to somebody under certain circumstances, but I'm not going to actually care if I have a physical copy of that. 4,
unless I have to read it for homework or whatever, I get so far behind by the time I say, oh yeah, I love this so much, I need to get my own copy. Yeah, it's impossible to find.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Well, that's just the thing, It's just like if it's that good, it's like, okay, I'll give you an example of this. I had to put my money where my mouth was. It's like one of my favorite stories of the last 10 years was the Mike Allred, Dan Slott Silver Surfer run. And that introduces this character, Dawn Greenwood. So I went and bought myself I had it all in trade, and I think I still do because that's one of my favorite stories. So it's a 9+0 story or better. So I have it all in trade. But it's like, I want to own the first issue. So I went and picked up the first issue because I wanted to have her first appearance. Well, come to find out, Silver Surfer 1 is not her first appearance. Her first appearance is in all new Marvel .1, which unfortunately, well, for me, because I wanted it for Dawn Greenwood, but that also has the first appearance of Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel. So that book, is up there in price. So I wasn't even able to get a 9.8. I picked up a 9.6 and paid way more for that than what I probably should have paid for a book that I was getting for Dawn Greenwood. But because I wanted to own the first appearance of Dawn Greenwood, I bought that book. So I put my money where my mouth was. So and I have a 9.6 copy of Kamala Khan's first appearances, but I don't have it for Kamala Khan. I got it for Dawn Greenwood. There you go. All right. Well, anything else to add to What If, Shadecraft, or Stray Dogs?
No, I just think it was a good combination of stories to cover. I enjoyed this one.
Mm-hmm. And it's the first time we've done much. We've focused on indie stuff more than on the big guys,
Yeah.
So that was a nice change. So, all right. Well, Mike, somebody wanted to reach out to you and tell you how right you are about stray dogs, where would they do that at?
They would do it at M as in Mike .Atchison ATCHISON 90 at gmail.com.
Shad, what about you?
You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Shad Schubert. That's SHAADSCHUBERT.
And if you want to send me an encouraging message about my Ford 9.8 Shadecrafts, that there's any hope for those to become valuable, you can email me at admin@bergcomics.com, BURGcomics.com, which you can find on my website, bergcomics.com. And I guess I'll go ahead and mention, even since we're getting close to the end of November, January of 2022, we'll have SalukiCon, and I will be set up at SalukiCon, and I will be focusing in on like raw books. For that, I've already got a stack of about 30-40 new raw books to add to the wall, so in addition to graded books. So be sure and check out my Facebook page, or I'll post pictures at some point of someone that'll be available for sale for the first time at the show in Carbondale. So thank you very much for listening. We will probably be back soon. It'll either be previews next, or we'll have to get close to wrapping up our discussion of Immortal Hulk with the last 2 volumes of Immortal Hulk. So we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, I just I had to come up because I kept early on when we were doing the ratings, like everything was like an 8, an 8.5, right? Yeah, and then it's like, no, okay, I said this was an 8.5. I'm giving this an 8, but I like this 8.0 better than this 8.5. I need to have some consistency built in. So
no, I don't think that's possible. I think that given the day of the week, the mood you're in, the other person's on the podcast rating, that influences everything. So
yeah,
hey, nobody's holding us to this.
Yeah. You guys are probably closer to being right on the stray dogs. It's probably closer to that 8 or 9 than it is a 6. I would say for sure. But
it's good enough that I know my wife. I mean, I wonder about the dark aspect to it, but she's gonna read it when I get back this weekend. She's gonna read it. And, she loves dogs that much, so I'm excited about that. Actually,
yeah, there you go. It might be her gateway drug into.
Oh yeah, that'd be too good to be true.
You can imagine the 2 of you just laying in bed reading comics together.
Oh,
little selfie of you reading your comics together.